Welcome, everyone, to the We Are In It Together podcast. And I'm Jamie Lynn. I'm really excited to be here today with Grant. Welcome, Grant.
Hi.
And Grant is 17 years old, and he is here to talk to us today about his recent adventures in learning mindfulness and self-compassion. And so we're going to learn a little bit about Grant's journey and kind of generalize this to teens in general. What are some of the challenges they face? How does mindfulness and self-compassion help? And what can we do to help more teens in mindfulness have this inner resource? So welcome, Grant.
Welcome. Hi.
So I oftentimes like to start off with something a little playful in my podcast, which is talking about our feelings habits. And I like to use animals. As you know, I shared with you earlier that I have a quiz and you can find out, do you tend to hide feelings like chameleon, kind of obsess about feelings like the beaver, explode with feelings like the bear, or kind of be like, is it okay to have feelings like the deer? Do you want to share? What are you open to sharing what your feelings habit is?
Yeah,
Or
I can
habits?
share a little. For me, I guess it really varies on who I am. Maybe I like think about things a lot more when I'm by myself, or I might like act like nothing's wrong when I'm like with my parents or with my friends or something. But I would say I'm like kind of a mix of all of them.
Gotcha, gotcha. So maybe if you're going to highlight two, it'd be a little bit of the beaver of thinking about things,
Hmm.
and that chameleon, like I'm fine, nothing's wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've shared before what mine are, but I'm a kind of a mix of all of them, except for I'm not a chameleon. I don't tend to hide feelings. That's why I have a podcast where we talk about feelings. So I think I'd like us to begin by talking a bit about some of the stressors that teens face that would make having mindfulness and self-compassion helpful. And even if you wanted to share a little bit of the own stressors that you faced, in high school, in your learning, whatever extracurriculars what are some of the kind of the stressors that teens faced?
A big one could be like schoolwork and like pressure from parents and pressure from school to get stuff done on time and just be caught up with all seven of your classes because it can be a lot if you're not on top of it. If you're taking like five APs, that's a lot.
Absolutely. And I don't know if this is true in your life, but I know I have a 16-year-old daughter, and she oftentimes wants to do more. Right?
Hmm.
So she's like, I want to do this and I want to do this. And I think sometimes it's externally caused, but sometimes it's internally caused. And what do you see with your like your peers? Do you see, is it more external, more internal, or kind of a combination of both?
Like, why did they decide to take the classes?
Or just the stress that they feel? Is it coming from the outside? Did they put it on themselves?
Um, I'd say it might be, at least with the people I know, it might be coming from the outside because they're kind of like procrastinators. So they might wait to the last second. And then everyone's like, come on, you got to do this. And then they're like kind of stressed out about it. But
Absolutely.
I can definitely see it both ways.
Yes. And what about the peer-to-peer stressors and the do I fit in? And I'm just curious, what's your experience with that? What's your experience kind of like if you take the temperature of, I know that's one of the things that I think teens oftentimes don't talk about between one another, but what is your sense as far as that being a stressor that teens are experiencing?
It can definitely be there. For a lot of my senior, or not senior, but sophomore year, really, and some of my junior year, I didn't really like have one main friend group. I just kind of like walked around and I kind of realized that I wasn't really friends with anyone. I was just friendly with a lot of different people. And I never really hanged out with anyone like outside of school or anything. But as soon as I like actually found a friend group and stopped like walking around, it was a lot different. So like don't be afraid to try new options if it isn't working.
Mm,
That means like outside of school too, because not every school is going to have someone that you're friends with.
right. So for you, actually becoming vulnerable, if you will, and really getting to know some people more
Yeah.
decreased your stress load, would you say, or like just increased your
Um,
well-being?
it it was kind of weird at first because I wasn't like used to like actually staying at one table the whole lunch. But then I guess after a while I got used to it. And I don't know. I'm kind of friendly. So like when I decided to stick with somebody, I guess they liked me and then we started hanging out.
That's great. That's great. Well, and I think one of the things that can affect how stressful the teenage years feel or don't feel are kind of the coping skills and the experiences we bring from our childhood on up, right?
Mhm.
Like if I think about my own experience, I growing up, I had like some like woohoo, like this awesome stuff going on in my childhood. And I had like ooh, boo, 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 boo.
Yeah.
And I truthfully didn't grow up with like a big reserve of coping skills, right? So
Yeah.
by the time I was a teenager, I would say like my my feelings habit animals when I was a teen, I probably actually was somewhat of a chameleon, if you will. Like I would kind of try to hide some of the feelings if I couldn't hide them. But I also, for myself, I think they would come out sideways, and I would almost like tell myself stories that like if I can just fill in the blank, I'll be okay. Right? Like
Yeah.
if I can just be in the right friendship
Yeah.
group, I'll be okay. If I can just have the right boyfriend. Like I think I just, as like a substitute for dealing with feelings, I created like external stories around um what I needed to do to be okay. And so I'm just curious, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, Grant. But as far as growing up, what coping skills did you have in place before you became a teen that you utilized, or what skills did you lack that maybe you've since learned as far as dealing with emotions?
I want to connect with you when you were talking about, remind me again, it was like the how you want to be okay. Sorry.
Yeah, this idea that if I can blank,
Yeah, yeah, there it is.
uh-huh, mm-hmm.
So I feel like some of my life I have been like, oh, if I can just hang out with my friends, I can de-stress and you know, it'll be easier. But like you can't always hang out with your friends. You can't always do something. And your brain is wired in a way that it's always going to find the negative in the thing that you're doing. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that just take the best thing that you can do in the current moment. Like if you can't go like hang out with your friends and I don't know, maybe play a video game by yourself or something. Just like do the second best thing or just do as best as you can because there's no because I know it's hard to like just say don't stress about it because like that's not how it works and that's for me too. But like it's really just getting your mind off of the things that you want to do, you know, the beaver, the loop, and just like even if that just means like going on a walk, going on a hike, just getting your mind off of it. At
Mm.
least for me, has worked well because I'm kind of a beaver.
Right. So in these, so you're talking, so right now we're talking about like positive coping skills, right? So
Yeah.
this idea of I'm stressed, what actions can I take if you will, in order to help myself re-regulate? Are these are these skills that you grew up with, or are these things that you've learned more recently?
Semi recently, my mom's a mindfulness teacher, so she's kind of like been slowly bringing in this stuff since I was like 13. So I kind of knew about it, but I've definitely over the past couple of years, I've definitely improved on that massively.
Gotcha. So pre-13, what was the skills that you were utilizing, or do you even remember back then?
Oh boy, that was a while ago. Um, I feel like my mom may have not understand me as well because she talks about how um before she knew mindfulness and self-compassion that she would just like get confused and maybe angry and blame herself when I was having a big feeling and we both didn't really know how to express ourselves so it kind of just maybe blew up but then afterwards it was just more connecting and more talking and more like sympathy I guess.
So what I'm hearing from you is that your mom's journey in some ways is parallel to your journey in
Yeah.
learning how to deal with things.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, and you, this past year, you took you started your own adventure, right? You decided you wanted to take mindfulness and self-compassion training. Yes?
Yeah.
So what prompted you to decide that you wanted to pick up the skills yourself? And because I'm imagining that in the beginning it was just your mom practicing them and then kind of holding space for you in a way that helped you to internalize it. Or I'm just curious what led to you saying, I want to learn this for myself.
Like, why did I do the summer camp?
A
Was
summer
it?
camp, and you took a mindful self-compassion training,
Oh
right?
yeah.
So what prompted you to say, I want to learn these skills on my own?
I guess I just really wanted to see what other teenagers experienced. And I feel like at that point I had like a pretty good idea of what I was doing and like how I operate and the mindfulness skills and the compassion. I guess I really wanted to see, how universal it is. And then once I like got in the group and I saw like, wow, everyone really acts the same way, like deep down they have the same like feelings, same exclamations for like the way they act. That makes sense.
So you were drawn to it in some ways to like for connection, like you wanted to feel more
Yeah.
connected. Would you say that was your motivation?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe.
Did something inside of you told you that you'd feel less alone?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm curious, did you so you may or may not feel comfortable answering this question, but it makes me curious your friendship group versus like the connections you made when you did a mindful self-compassion for teens class, or when I know you went to a mindfulness IBME summer camp.
Mhm.
The connections and the depth of your ability to like be vulnerable and share,
Mhm.
would you say it's the same in your friendship groups, or it was different in these groups? How would you say it's similar or different?
Well, at least for the virtual one, it was a little bit weirder and different to be like vulnerable because it's like online, so you don't have like the same, you can't really sense how the person is feeling and acting. But the one in person, the summer camp, the sleepaway one, I feel like everyone else was so vulnerable that my vulnerability was kind of like not as much, because like the teachers in the summer camp at least, they told like how their whole life story and like how mindfulness trains, and they were very vulnerable with everything. And there were lots of people who've done this 3 or 4 times, and they were extremely vulnerable with everyone as well. So maybe I was a little vulnerable there, but I feel like maybe it wasn't as much as like some of the people have been doing this for a long time.
Absolutely. But would you say your vulnerability increased over your time there?
um Maybe, perhaps.
Maybe.
I
And
don't
then
I don't I don't really know.
my curiosity would be too, did you see any transfer effects to your relationships with the people, your mom, your brother, your friends? Did you notice? And I guess as we can kind of broaden this, like have you since you've been more formally practicing, like more
Mhm,
consciously trying to and I guess again there's like I have layers of questions here. As I want to ask you one question, I think of another question.
mhm.
So why don't I back up and just say, how are you practicing mindfulness and self-compassion? Like, what does that look like for you to practice these skills
Like,
on a
outside of
day-to-day
school or
basis,
just okay. Well, for
either
me,
formally or informally?
I guess it really depends. Sometimes when I'm feeling really overwhelmed and I'm thinking of a lot of stuff, I don't really like feeling busy or overwhelmed. So I might put on like a calming, relaxing music and meditation and listen to that for like 30 minutes or something, and that helps. But if I if I feel like, well, before that actually, I used to try to be a thinker and try to think my way out of situations, which mixed results. What I would do, I'd have a note sheet and I would like kind of write down what I was feeling, and then I could like see, oh, this doesn't make sense. This is illogical. And then that would help, but it definitely wouldn't help as much as like talking to someone, like in person, like talking to a friend or something, or just like hanging out. Um, and I guess the mindfulness with the music and stuff that helped. um, I don't want to say more or less, but maybe a little bit more. Just because it's just I wasn't thinking of anything. With the other one, I was still thinking in some form.
So for you, just sitting and listening to music really helps to reset.
Yeah. Or
Mhm.
like just going to a different place, seeing different things.
So kind of getting into your five senses, really.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
helps you from, again, that kind of that beaver habit, that thinking habit. It helps you to kind of get into the
Mhm.
present moment. And so you get a little relief from that. And
Yeah.
that journaling about your feelings, I mean, that in and of itself is a mindfulness practice. Is that something, like you said, when your mom, started learning self-compassion and mindfulness, a handful of years ago, did she introduce that practice for you? Or like when did you start to write about your feelings? Because even that actually is a positive coping skill. Is that something you did earlier on before your mom started learning mindfulness, or how did you develop that practice?
So actually, I used to kind of like my mom would help me through like a lot of my feelings. And then she told me something that kind of just like blew my mind one day or something like that. And she was like, you gotta like be able to rely on yourself because like you're the only person you can rely on. And I was like, dang, you're right. I gotta. So then I tried to step away from like asking, like explaining my feelings every time because that's not gonna work in every situation. And then I started moving more towards the notes. And then actually over this past summer camp, I realized that if you have the availability and to a better coping mechanism, there's no reason you shouldn't take it just to practice another coping mechanism, you know?
So that's really great. So you did use talking, and then you realized, wow, I need to like go inward and learn to process things myself. And then you realize, but talking works. So why not,
Yeah,
when talking is available, use
yeah,
it, and then have a skill set that's available to when,
yeah,
yeah, there's a lot of wisdom there. A lot
yeah.
of wisdom, right? Because again, somewhere between self-reliance and codependence is interdependence,
Hmm.
which is really, that's what we're trying. It's something I think our society, to be perfectly honest, is not super good at.
Yeah.
um and something that I think we all need, where I can give, I can receive, I can take care of myself when I need to, that flow back and forth.
Something that was like really hard for me on this issue was I wanted, when I wasn't like really good friends with someone, but I just kind of like wanted to talk to someone just so I could like get out of my own head. But then at the same time, I felt like, well, then you're not really friends with them because if you're just talking with them to solve your problems, that's not really a friend thing to do. That was kind of hard for me for a while. But then I guess I figured that out when that's just like when you're in your head so much. You just like got to do anything else because if you keep thinking about it, it's only gonna get worse. You just got to pick an option and do it.
So tell me more. So I don't know that I'm exactly following. So you were saying, so I guess if you can give me a little bit more on that one, so I can understand the nuance between being a good friend, not being a good friend. I didn't quite follow that one.
Well, I wanted to hang out with people, but like I only really wanted to hang out with them when I might be having like a hard feeling. So then I can, I'm distracted and we're having fun or whatever. But then I was like, well, that's not really being a friend because I don't want to hang out with them when I'm fine because friends are there no matter what. So,
And so have you shifted how you relate to your friends, like now?
well, I just guess I realized that there's a difference between apprentices and friends. And, you know, I was maybe turning to the apprentices to like try to help my feelings. But when I really need to be turning to the friends or turning to myself or just like even just going out and going on a walk and, being friendly, seeing how other people act. So you're not like the only one. That makes sense.
Mhm. So maybe in part to just broadening your awareness to what's going on for others,
Hmm.
that flow back and forth, right? So I think sometimes people judge like self-compassion as being selfish,
Mhm,
which it would be if it was just all about me,
mhm.
right? And so, but ironically, when we take care of ourselves and we have more of our inner needs met, we can actually show up better for others,
Yeah.
right? Because then we can interact with them without it having to be all about us because
Mhm.
we've taken some care of ourselves.
For
And
sure.
have you noticed any impact of kind of growing your mindfulness and self-compassion on your family life?
Definitely. I'd say during the school year, when me and my family had a problem, it wouldn't be that big of a deal because we wouldn't see each other that much. I would go to school and then we'd come back, and then it would just kind of be like one big distraction. And I've always felt like distractions are necessary, but I just there's a deeper meaning behind it. And I kind of felt like I wanted to understand it. So over the summer, I really have not had a lot to do. So I've felt like I've gotten the opportunity to talk with my family more about the problems we've been having so we can actually get to the root of the problem and fix it that way instead of just like distraction. Because with distraction, it's always going to come back up. It's just like you're not thinking about it all the time. If you actually like cut at the root, then it gets a lot better because then you're on the same page. There's no hard feelings. That
Wow.
makes
I mean,
sense.
that's really deep. That's really profound.
Thank you.
I'm really I'm just like listening to it. I'm like, wow, that's so um I'm kind of touched as I listen to that. So moving and what is when you say getting at the root, does that involve you doing more listening to others? Like what does that look like in your family life when you're not just like, yeah, there's a problem, look away. What does that look like in real time?
Um, well, it works best when honestly we all just like sit and talk in like a circle about how we're feeling, and no one's like, "I hate you because you did this and this." Because that my mom taught me to use like, "I feel blank when you blank" or something like that.
Yeah, so constructive conversations and less would you say your reactivity has decreased over time as you've been practicing mindfulness and self-compassion?
I feel like I've not reactivity, but I can feel when I'm going to be reactive.
Mhm.
So I guess I'm just more mindful of it.
And then
Then I
what
can,
happens? Do you still pop the same way, or are you able to say, "Whoa, I'm getting react," like, I'm curious, what's that?
I'm able to choose what I want to do next.
Yeah, so that's I guess that's how I would define so reactive versus responsive, right?
Yeah.
So from like kind of my understanding of it is reactive is there is a feeling and I'm acting without awareness and without choice.
Hmm.
But responsive is I'm still going to be a human being that can notice like, whoo, like I'm getting activated here, right? And then but then having a choice about what does my response look like? So it sounds like that has grown for you.
Yeah.
Wow, how nice. Great. So I'm curious, do you have any advice? I mean, again, like this is so funny when you take someone who's like in a particular age group and be like, do you have any advice for anybody else in that age group, right? Which of course every individual is unique. But
Hmm.
would you do you have any advice for teens as far as learning mindfulness and self-compassion? Yeah, that's my question.
Don't be afraid to use what works because for me, I might feel like, oh, this is stupid. Like this is a silly coping mechanism. Like nobody else does this, but if it works, it doesn't matter, right? So just not getting yourself, at least for fellow beavers like me, just not getting yourself so caught up in this is silly, this is not going to work, and just going with it. Because the more time you're caught up in, no, this isn't going to work, then more problems come up, more things come up, and at least for me,
Absolutely, that's great. Yeah, so don't overthink it. If it works, like try. So I guess
yeah,
the first thing you have to do is you have to be willing to try it,
yeah,
right? And then if you try it and it works, like do it. Um,
and
I'm going to ask one more question here that I'm curious about. And again, feel free to approach it however you'd like. So I'm curious about gender roles because I do think that there's oftentimes this idea that like and I'm working on some of them for myself. There's this idea oftentimes that like females are supposed to be feelings oriented and talk about feelings and be communal, and men are supposed to be more thought and productivity oriented and focus on agency. And so in some ways, as a male who's learning more mindfulness and self-compassion skills, you're defying some of those gender roles. So I'm just curious, did you feel those gender roles like externally from greater society, and like how did you kind of transcend that to say like, no, I'm gonna find the resources that work for me? And so I'm that's my question.
That's a really good question, actually, because I do feel like, at least for a lot of my friends, they don't really think about things. They just do them. And so that might just be, yeah, the gender roles, that might just be they haven't taken mindfulness. But I'm mindful because I'm able to like realize they're doing that. And yeah, I definitely say it's there.
Mhm. But for you, you just decided I'm not gonna care what everybody else thinks, or was that a conscious choice? Or did you feel like your family kind of empowered you to? I'm curious how you were able to not be, or maybe you were afraid and you just said I'm going to do it anyways. But I'm curious what strategies internally or externally you used to persevere despite those gender roles.
I'd say having a close relationship with someone or a close friendship with someone, because then you know that you're not like the only one struggling. Because I feel like when my friendships weren't as good and I was like, you know, walking around doing my coping mechanism, I felt like others were judging me, and I was like, oh, they were just judging me. They don't care. They don't understand, but they have their own problems they're dealing with. And, once you actually like get to know someone and know their problems, and, or just, you know, understand yourself, then that can help a lot more. At least for me, that helped.
So your friendship group actually made it feel safer to
Mhm.
be a little bit more aware, vulnerable kind
Yeah.
of thing. And then I guess that the follow-up question to that is like, what what external or internal supports helped you make that shift between I'm floating around between friendship groups and I don't really connect to I'm gonna yeah, I'm actually gonna sit down and get to know people. What
Mm.
what prompted you to do that?
Um, Honestly, I don't really know. I I guess I guess I just realized like these people care about me, so I should care about them too. And I guess because usually when I got home or after school or something, I'd always been busy with doing my hobbies and stuff. But just during that time, I was less busy for whatever reason, so I had more time to think about. It's like, okay, these people care about me. I should show up for them more often.
So it was really an internal shift.
Hmm.
All right, and I'm gonna make a. I do know like your mom is a researcher also in the field of self compassion, so I've had interactions with her over time. I'm curious, do you? So I'm projecting here. So if I project and you're like, no, Jamie Lynn, that's okay. But do you feel like that really like as your relationship with her got closer because she grew those mindfulness and self compassion skills and she grew less judgmental? Do you feel like that impacted? Like maybe even that ability to look outside the home and say, where else can I kind of, I'm curious if you think that was a factor.
What do you mean, like look outside the home?
No, I mean like with your friends, like that relationship feeling more nurturing, safe, made you think, where can I have more relationships that feel nurturing and safe? And if, again, if you're like, I'm not sure, that's okay. But I'm just wondering if that relationship perhaps impacted others.
I don't know if it was necessarily my mom, but I guess it might have been that I've always been like really friendly and stuff. So there's just some people who are just like nicer and I get together with better and we're just, click. And then there's some people who are just like not at all. So then I guess I thought, why is that? And you just gotta like put yourself out there. That makes sense. I don't know
Yeah,
if
so
that
it sounds like really actually for you, it was just more self reflection.
yeah, lots of thinking.
Yeah, well, honestly, right? Like you just became more reflective and decided. So again, lots of really awesome transformations. And I'm also thinking about people that might watch this podcast, right? Because
Mhm.
oftentimes parents want to know, what can I do? Is there something I can do? I'm sure there's lots of parents watching this podcast who are like, how
Mhm.
can I help my child want to learn mindfulness and self-compassion? How can I help
Yeah.
my child open up to kind and nurturing relationships? But it sounds like for you, your mom had her own practice. You did have a safe container at home. And then at some point, something inside of you just opened up.
Yeah.
And even the same is true, I think, when you took the mindfulness and self compassion training. Your mom wasn't telling you to do that, right?
No.
No. Which is also good for parents to hear, because it wasn't like she's telling you, she's telling you, she's telling you, and it's okay. She was on her own journey. And then at some point, you just decided you wanted it, huh?
Well, I mean, she told me about it.
Hmm.
And I was like, would this be interesting? And I was like, I'll check it out, sure.
Okay, so she just kind of put it in front of you, and then
Yeah.
you decided to.
I was like, sounds interesting.
Great. And so as you go into your senior year, I'm just a little curious if there's, as far as aspirations for continuing to grow and change, or it sounds like a lot of too, I know you and I touched base briefly yesterday, a lot of what you said is growing stronger in you is like letting go of perfectionism and having a little bit of more self-acceptance. So as you think about stepping into your senior year, like, what are your aspirations as far as continuing to grow?
Um,
And no small questions here.
hey, no what?
No small questions here, right? Yeah,
Okay,
I'm asking you deep
yeah.
questions here.
I'd say like continuing to be mindful because the more different situations you're in, the more you can realize that your brain likes to go down shortcuts, likes to take the trail that's already worn down. And then the more you can realize that, the more you can start to form a new trail.
So yeah, so watching the pathway, and then
Yeah.
choosing pathways that work for you, or choosing pathways that lead to more well-being, or how do you
Just
discern?
choosing pathways that you didn't see before and are better, I guess, or just different because, you know, different doesn't necessarily mean better, but different means if you take one pathway, it could lead to five new pathways, and those could all be better. But you wouldn't have known that if you didn't take the 50-50 that you were like, oh, this one's 50% and this one's also 50%. Which one do I take? But if you take this 50, it leads to like bad options. If you take this 50, leads to good options. So it's really just about changing it up sometimes.
That's beautiful, beautiful. So staying curious, staying aware,
Yeah.
and 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 staying.
And
Sometimes it sounds like breaking out of your own habits,
yeah,
that you can
not being too
discover
hard
more
on yourself
possibilities.
too.
Which I think for myself can sometimes feel scary, right?
Yeah.
Like it can feel scary. So I guess in some ways it requires a lot of courage to to break the habits.
I'd say for me, it really just required a lot of understanding of myself because it's just like, oh, I want to do that. It's so easy. And then I guess I just slowed down. I was like, well, why? Well, there's this way that's so much better. And then I was like, oh yeah. But that just takes a lot of like deep understanding of yourself.
It sounds like
That can be
understanding,
hard.
and it sounds like too there's a lack of judgment.
Yeah.
And did you always have that lack of judgment, or did you used to be more critical? Like, I'm curious.
I'd say I definitely used to be more critical because I was a lot more sensitive to other people's opinions, or not other people's opinions, just like how others act around me. Like, oh, they're not talking to me, so they must not like me or something. But I guess I really just understood myself and what I need so much more that it hasn't affected me as much.
That's great. And that's one of the things I really wish. as a person who teaches mindfulness and self-compassion to kids and teens, that's what I wish. Because what I hear you talking about is freedom,
Yeah.
right? Like freedom to be yourself, freedom to make different choices, freedom to let go of judgment. And it's not, again, I think another misnomer sometimes of self-compassion is people think that self-compassion means that you say, like, it's okay, it's fine, whatever I do. And I really hear you uh, continually inviting yourself to really be honest, to be self-aware, and to make choices that are going to lead to your long-term well-being rather than necessarily your short-term comfort.
Yeah, I'd also definitely say that I couldn't have done this like by myself. You're gonna need support. Like, if I was just sitting there thinking about mindfulness and thinking about choosing the right options, I just would have gotten stressed and I would have gotten nowhere. So it just means taking those breaks, talking to different people. You can't go 100% in one thing. You got to split it up. It doesn't make sense. Like, I'll give an example. On my mindfulness self-compassion retreat, in the morning we did like 3 hours of meditation, like silent meditation, and then breakfast, which was like also silent. And then after that, it was like I talked to everyone. I was feeling irritable because like my thoughts are like getting up. Then I talked to everyone else, and I was like, everyone else feels irritable. So then I stopped like feeling as irritable. I was like, oh, everyone else is irritable. So it's normal. You can't do 100% all the time.
So on that retreat, that was the IB me one, right?
Yeah, yeah,
On that retreat, for you, knowing that other people were experiencing what you were experiencing, cut the
yeah.
self-judgment.
Connection. That's big, and that's hard for teenagers. That's also hard to give advice for because that's just putting yourself out there and understanding yourself and being sympathetic. Those are like the top three advice I can give. Understanding yourself, forgiving yourself. Well, that's just mindfulness and self-compassion, right? And I guess new experiences.
Beautiful. Wonderful. That's just
Thank
great.
you.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Grant, for joining me and sharing your experience, and also breaking down for our listeners again, what does mindfulness and self-compassion look like in plain language, right? So you're
Mhm.
saying, like, understanding yourself, forgiving yourself, trying new things, connecting with
Mhm.
others, right? So
Yeah,
again, sometimes these words can get in the way of the practicality. Listening to music, going for a walk, right? Giving
yeah,
yourself what you need in the moment.
yeah,
Great. Thank you so much.
yeah, for sure.
The world keeps turning, things change. We have new obstacles that are thrown in our way. In our way. You can't hold us down. Together we'll get around. You just have to look inside, and you will find that we are in it together. I know it in my heart. You are not alone. You are not, and we are in it together. I've known it from the start. You are not alone. You are not alone. You might feel lonely and down. You might be thinking things will always be this way. Be this way. But you got a friend in you. Self-compassion will get you through. You just have to look inside, and you will find that we are in it together. I know it in my heart. You are not alone. You are not, and we are in it together. I've known it from the start. You are not alone. You are not alone. We've got Bunny. You're not alone. Doodles, what can you do? Spots, we can be aware. And Snuggles, I care about you. When life gets hard.